Welcome to Spirit Journey Collective. I'm your host, Sarah Ty. Get ready for compelling conversations with guests of all walks of life who believe they have found their purpose. Together, we will uncover unique backstories, hearing the raw experiences that led them to the work they are doing today. Let's expand our minds together with the captivating stories and inspiration that awaits. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Spirit Journey Collective. I have a really great guest today. Her name is Shayleen Halloran. She practices Rapid Transformational Therapy, and she's a shamanic practitioner as well, which is pretty exciting. I have not had a chance to talk to a shaman practitioner yet. Thank you so much for being here today, Shayleen.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here with you. I love your podcast. I love what you're sharing. I just love everything that's centered around life purpose.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just kind of inspired to me because when I found my purpose, which it's obviously still evolving, like I think all of ours are, but for me, I would hear these stories on all these different podcasts, and I went from like sort of being open to all sorts like spiritual and all this other stuff to like I needed the groundedness too. So I feel like I want to bring all of it together. Like you can have your purpose in spirituality or in the arts or in, whatever. It's just purpose shows up in different ways. So I want to kind of like broaden the audience. So that way, I don't know. I'm trying to like open minds, I guess.
You do know, it's just articulating, right? You feel it in your heart. You have a knowing in your heart, but have you found the words to match up with it? That's why language it does feel limited.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, sometimes it's so funny. There's certain people I tell this to all the time. I'm like, I wish I could just like plug you in my head so I could like transfer what I'm trying to explain, because sometimes it's just too big of a thing to try and put into a box.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a challenge of a spiritual life path, I should say, because there's so many things that you can't even put into words.
Right, because it's so abstract and you have to it's a feeling more than it is anything tangible, I think. So why don't we start with sharing with our listeners just a little bit about you? Like what do you offer? Maybe explain what Rapid Transformational Therapy is and what it means to be a shamanic practitioner. Just a little bit about you.
For sure. Yeah. So I've been walking on the path of transformation, I guess, for a little over a decade now. It started out with yoga. Yoga changed my life. I say it got me out of the gutter. And the gutter was me. I was a bartender. I was running away from the pain that I experienced just from life, life's traumas that I didn't know how to deal with at the time. I was getting fat. So I was living at the beach, and I was living down in Fernandina, Florida. So I was at the beach and I didn't want to be fat in my swimsuit. So I was like, I need to start doing something. And as soon as I thought, I need to start doing something, I saw a flyer and it had these 2 yoga practitioners on it, and they looked so happy. They were I think they were in a reversed warrior. It was a husband and wife. And I was like, I'm gonna try that. Why not? And I went. The first time I was hooked. It was like a shift happened, and it just naturally drew me out of the bars. I still worked in the bar for another decade after that, but it sobered me up because I was tuning my body. I was moving my body and tuning it into these healing fields. So when I was going to this class with this couple, they were like, you should try to be a yoga teacher. I think that you'd be really good at it. And I totally just let it roll off my back. Who, me? Why would I be a yoga teacher? I was a mess. So fast forward a few years, I do find myself into a yoga teacher training class, a 200-hour, and I was simultaneously taking classes at the university, and I was majoring in psychology. When I was majoring in psychology, I was noticing the correlation between PTSD and my family. My dad was a Vietnam vet. I looked at all of the check boxes that you can see, and I said, whoa, my dad had PTSD. This was what was wrong with them. And I thought, you know what? Yoga would be great for these guys. So I looked around for a teacher training, and the first teacher training the first teacher that I came across, her name was Catherine Ashton, and she pioneered a program called Yoga to Transform Trauma. And when I went to the informational meeting, she was talking about PTSD, how trauma shows up in the body. And she was checking all of the boxes that I didn't even know that I had. And I was just like that feeling in your body, that struck feeling, I need to go this way. it was there. So I started to go there. And then later on, it was a few years later, I started to get bored with teaching yoga. I really do love teaching yoga. I love the practice, but I felt like there was something missing. I'm not really reaching the soul part of the person. And whenever I get one-on-one with somebody, there's an activation that happens that I see them kind of shift out of a trance that they have been in. And I thought, maybe I want more of this. I want to do more of this. I did the Yoga to Transform Trauma training, learned about how trauma lives in the body. And then I was coming towards the end of college, and I knew college wasn't right for me. I knew I wasn't meant to go on to the master's level because they kept shoving the DSM-5 in our faces, and which is in the DSM-5, that's the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, 5th edition. And it's basically a book that insurances use to label people. It's nice to have a universal symptom chart. It's nice, but I didn't like to label people. Labeling, it doesn't feel right. Whenever they were like, here's this case study, why don't you see what you would label this one as? I was, they're traumatized. Like, what do you that's what I would label it. Why don't we fix them, not label them and focus on, I don't know what medication we're going to shove down their throat next. So it just didn't feel right. And I met up with my mentors, I met up with my teachers, my professors, and even I did an apprenticeship at the Lake County Jail here in Northwest Indiana. I met with I don't know what you call him, the dude that I did the apprenticeship underneath, another teacher. It's just another one of those teachers. And I was like, what do I do? I want to help people, but I don't want to go to the master's level. I don't want to go on. So the week that I started, I had meetings set up all week long. And the week that I started to look for what am I going to do next, Rapid Transformational Therapy came up. So I'm making this story really long, but Rapid Transformational Therapy is a practice from Marissa Peer, and she had been working on this practice for over 30 years, perfecting it. And she's created a system to help people to get to the root causes of their issues. So back in 2018 or 19 or 17, I don't know, it was back then, I ended up going to her training, and I trained right underneath Marissa Peer to learn how to deliver this method. It is like therapy, personal development on steroids. Somebody will come to me and say they have anxiety, and we tap into the feeling. So we're going into the root cause of the anxiety, because that's just a surface level symptom of what's going on. And then there's a problem that lies beneath it. And a lot of times what we do is we're regressing back to childhood and healing the inner child at that point. So that's the rapid transformational therapy part. It's a form of hypnosis. We're able to go into the subconscious to find the root causes of the issues. We use regression therapy, neurolinguistic programming, cognitive behavioral therapy, and psychotherapy. It's all wrapped up in one. And I've had people come to me with they're experiencing panic attacks that would land them in the hospital because they thought that they were having heart attacks. And in one session, we've been able to clear it up, clear that energy out of their system. How incredible is that?
Yeah, that's amazing, because usually, you think of therapy and you think it's going to be a long process. It's going to take time to like go backwards. And so you're kind of like, let's just speed that up. Let's take the fast track.
Yeah, that's my nature. I don't know if it's because I'm in the millennial time frame, but I don't like to waste time. I do not like repetition. I like to experience as much of life as possible. And it didn't make sense for me to take the slow route. If there was something faster, take me to it. Let me figure that out. So with the hypnosis though, whenever you go into hypnosis, you can open up a can of worms. And there was this one time I took somebody into a session, and then I tried to regress them. And whenever they were going into their regression, their voice changed. And whenever their voice changed, it was like there was a certain rigidity in the body. And immediately I felt there's something off about this session. Now, it's only out of the hundreds of people that I've done this with, it's only happened with one. So I don't want to scare people off of rapid transformational therapy. So it was almost like an extreme disassociative thing that happened. It was like a different person showed up in that session. And I felt like I was fumbling or I was stumbling around in that session because I didn't know what to do with it. It didn't really flow with the framework that I had been working with. It was just weird. So I finished up that session and I was just, I say, love bombing, not in the way, the narcissistic way, but like love bomb. I was putting so much love and loving energy into that person in that session that after we put that energy in there, the softness came over them. So I called up a friend that I had gone to RTT training with. She's a psychic medium and she's based out of England. Her name is Wendy Terry. I was like, what was that? What just came up? And then she told me about spiritual attachments. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know what the F to do with this. Or what am I going to do with this? It was a couple of years into my RTT training. And then I was like, I need to figure out how to deal with it if it comes up again. And as soon as I started to ask that week, my mentor, my shamanic practitioner mentor came on my radar. We were at a playground and I was talking to a friend and she was like, hey, did you know that so-and-so had gotten a depossession? I was like, hold on, what? Where? I need to figure out who this is. I need to go into this contact. And his name's Tom Dornicek, the guy that taught me the shamanic practitioner stuff. And I used that in my practice to deal with the spiritual stuff, which is, there's nothing that's not spiritual. So it's enhanced my practice for the RTT work. So that's about where I've been and where I don't know, my training is now.
That is so cool. I mean, it's just one synchronicity after the next, right? Kind of like the breadcrumbs. And it's one of those things that you really only see it in hindsight, but every time you were ready for the next level, I don't know if you've heard the saying, but when you're ready, the teacher will come. It's kind of like you kept reaching these places where you kind of knew that there's more, and then, oh, there's your next teacher. And yeah, that is so cool.
It happens all of the time. Anytime, I mean, even with clients still today, if there's something that that's coming in that maybe I haven't worked with yet, I will get the information that I need within 3 days of the session. The information of how I'm supposed to work with them and help to transform their trauma. I will get that information through, and I never have to worry about it, which is incredible.
It just comes to you when you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done a lot of healing work for myself too, to be able to open up those channels, and it's just a fun ride to get on.
So I haven't experienced that, but I don't know, who knows the more, because I'm pretty new on my spiritual journey. I've been on my spiritual journey now for about 4 years. And then I've been running my business for about 3. So I'm still, like, as far as like learning and healing, I've done a lot of it, but I know there's still a lot more to go. So, but I would love to get to that point. Like right now, I will say, when I sit down to do my readings, that's like the only time that I'm really good at just opening up the channel / putting my ego aside and just opening up. Like I can't explain it other than that. I just it's like I just plug into something and I know it's higher power, and, but like any other time when I don't have my cards, when I'm not doing readings, I feel like it's like closed off to me. So.
Yeah. Did you notice that there was a shift about 3 years into once you got initiated? Did you notice there was a shift or an opening that happened about 3 years into it?
You know what? Actually, kind of, because it was probably last year that I started realizing that I was more of a channel than a reader, because I would randomly get phrases or words that would just come to me that I would normally never say for that card or that thing, but it would make sense to the person. And now it's gone from phrasing to random words. So like I was giving a reading at I do events sometimes, and I was doing a bridal shower event, and I was just giving this reading for this woman, and she was asking about her purpose, but a lot of what I was getting was like, oh, you're too busy for your purpose. We got to clear some space for you. But the word that kept coming to me was checklists. I would never use for any of that. So I finally said, I don't know why, but I keep getting the word checklist. And she basically was like, oh, I don't work outside of a checklist. I have to have a checklist to work inside. And I was like, that's it. You need to throw out the checklist, and give yourself more wiggle room and stuff. But that wouldn't have made any sense to it didn't make sense to me or anyone else, but I've been getting more of those. And then also more connection with my guides too, which is a totally new thing.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I do feel like probably about a year ago was when something else shifted. I can't really explain it more than that.
That's what I see. It's about a 3-year process. I mean, there's instant awakenings that happen, but usually it's a purging or a like an ego death that happens, and it takes about 3 years that I've been noticing for folks to really come online. And what you're saying with the channeling in shamanic practitioner work, the aim is for us to become a hollow bone. So we become this vessel for information to come through. And as we're practicing that, we don't filter what comes through. The words that we say do not make sense to us because we don't have the context. But the words that we say that are being delivered to us through us to our clients, it makes sense to them. So that's why and it feels like you're making it up half the time, right? It feels like I'm imagining this. What is this? It doesn't feel real to you, but it resonates with the clients and it helps them to move forward, which is
Yeah,
all the proof that you need that there's something really happening here.
exactly. And the first few times it happened, it would be like it started kind of slowly. So first, probably like 2 years ago, a card, the meaning would shift. What I was
Mhm.
picking up was not how I would ever read that card. And it freaked me out. And I was like, so at first, it felt like I was being unethical because like I'm not sticking to what I learned.
Oh,
It kept kind of coming in louder. So I finally would just say it however it came in, and then I would see how it would land. And I was like, oh, maybe it's supposed to be that way. So yeah,
yeah.
it's definitely been like a trial and error. More recently, I still struggle with, I don't know, I have a lot of blocks that I'm trying to figure out how to unblock. Maybe we'll talk later.
That you're currently working through. So don't expect it to be all done at once.
True.
This is the fun part, you know? It's like you talk about breadcrumbs. I call them Easter eggs. So like the Easter egg hunt, you know? You're just finding these new little nuggets and these new little surprises, and you're just going along for the ride. It's fun.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm still struggling with trying to be in the driver's seat and also remembering that I'm not supposed to be in the, like I can't control it. I have to kind of surrender. That part's hard for me. But I have had just in the last 3 months, I've actually had automatic writing that's come through me. I've had like specific, that's why I started my podcast, was literally because I was told you need to start a podcast. Okay, I'm starting a podcast. And then I had this other project coming through me, but it was funny because I wrote down about the project and I forgot about it because it was automatic writing. It was this thing called the Alignment Project, and I explained it. Well, it was explained through me what it was going to be, but even it ended with, "You're not ready for the information now." And then, like a week ago, I got hit with this big inspiration to start this new thing, and I was in the middle of working on it, and that's when I found that automatic writing about the Alignment Project, and I was like, oh my God, it's time. Was that it? Because it's so freaky, and I'm just kind of like here for it.
No, I don't think it's not freaky at all. I think that's everything that's on purpose. It makes sense whenever you say you wrote it down, you're not ready for it yet, but because there were steps that you had to take. There's things that you are learning in your life or life mission right here, right now, that are going to help you help your clients. You can't help them if you haven't already been through it.
Yeah.
And that's the process that you're in right now. And it's like a waiting game.
And I do feel that, but I also like normally like I would be trying to like push more and do more. And I'm just kind of like, no, I feel like I'm in this. Yeah, it feels like the right timing will come. I just need to be patient and trust. So yeah. Wow. Well, this was a really short, but like super deep conversation. So from here, do you feel like you found your purpose in what you're doing right now?
I think I might view purpose a little differently than most. Maybe most here in the West. A lot of people talk about purpose, and a lot of times they're talking about their job, right? They're talking about, I found my life purpose. I'm doing this, and I don't really see it in that way. And whenever it comes to the job, I should say, or the way that I've been able to monetize my gifts, is I have found my strengths. I am very good at teaching. I'm very good at helping people to transform their trauma. I'm very good at like starting people on their soul path. I'm very good at that. and I've learned how to monetize that. Is that my life purpose? That's hard to say, because I'm a mom. I have 2 children, and there's a lot of time that I spend with my 2 children. I'm initiating them in some ways, but they're initiating me too. But when I'm not working and I'm not making money, am I out of my purpose? I don't know if that's right. So yes and no. I should say. I found what I'm really good at, and I found what I really like to do, and I'm able to monetize that, because I have a mortgage to pay. I've got food to buy. I have to live here on earth, and that's what it takes to live here on earth. But if I were to say, have I found my life purpose in an overarching way, I really truly believe that, of course, it's always evolving, that I'm here to master relationships. I think that's what if I were to kind of expand and look back at my life and see the most repetitive thing that continues to come up, it's figuring out how to deepen and expand on relationships, and how to love more and better. That feels like a life purpose to me. That feels like one I can really commit to for the rest of my life, you know?
I really love that. And that's a good point that, I think purpose, you might immediately think it's your job or what you do. But, there is obviously more components. If you're a parent, you have children, and they're a big part of, I have a child too, of an 8-year-old, and she's like my why for so many things, and family and friends. And, also like, what do you do in your free time for fun? What are some passions that you're not making money from, but you just really love to do? So one of my interviews recently, they mentioned how they were told, like, when she would ask about her purpose, she would connect to the Akashic records. And so she was given 2 answers. The first overarching purpose for every single soul on earth is love, which is exactly what you said. It's just, fostering that connection. But then we each have individual purposes that are more connected to, like, what's our mission? It's not just purpose, but what's our mission? And I'm kind of just learning this as I go. Like, that's just something that feels way more aligned.
Yeah.
What is your goal here on earth? I mean, other than being a human and having human experiences, which comes with family, friends, hobbies and passions and work, but what's like your drive for the world?
I'm here to shake things up. That's what I'm here to do. That's my mission.
Oh, I love that. I am slowly stepping in that direction. Yeah, I have a hard time with like pushback or confrontation, but I like in the certain circumstances, like when I do events, I love events because most of the people I give readings to have never had a reading before. They're, it's a new concept for them. And so I know that every time I connect with one of those people, I'm opening their minds a little bit or perspective. And so, a little bit of the same thing.
You're opening a portal, essentially. It's not just a rabbit hole, it's a wormhole that you're opening up for these people, because a lot of times they are on the outside and they're focused on the world outside, but you're helping them to tune in and tap into what's inside, and that's where spirit lives. It's not outside, you always looking out. You're opening that up for them.
100%. That's exactly it, because I don't want people to come to me and feel like I'm their guru or I know more than them. Like, everything that I do is geared to actually show them that they know more about themselves and what they need to do than they think they do. So it's more like empowering them to remember, like, hey, you already know the answer. Like 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, when people come to me and they have a question or they're not sure about what to do on something, they tell me by the end of it, yeah, I already knew that. I already knew that was what I was supposed to do. I just needed that confirmation. And I needed that validation. And that's it. That's like literally all I'm doing. I'm like a mirror for them, but it's the way that it's delivered, because I shouldn't know this stuff. It's not, that's the part that makes them question, like, well, she can know this and pick up on my situation.
Something to recognize is everybody does have intuition. Everybody does have the ability to listen to what their soul is telling them, what their higher self is telling them and guiding them towards. Perhaps, and I don't know if this is right, you tell me, but you're going to be guiding them back to their confidence and their ability to take action in alignment with what their higher self is telling them. That's the only thing that's stopping them from moving in that direction, is they don't have the confidence. They don't, because they don't trust it. Right?
Yeah, because what I would say, which is basically the same thing, is I feel like my mission is to empower people and put them back in the driver's seat. But it does take confidence to feel like you can trust being in the driver's seat, you know what I mean? And taking charge and knowing that, that self-trust, it's so hard in today's world. So that's really, which is funny because that's part of my lessons here on earth too, is learning self-trust. It's been like my biggest catalyst. So it is funny. You always teach what you most need to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the way the system works. It's not like you're going to be plugged into, I don't know, like gangsters on the south side of Chicago. You're not going to be put into that position to help people because you haven't lived that life. I don't think you have. I don't know how gangster you are, but but you're going to be walking on the path, and you might be 2 years, 3 years, 10 years ahead of somebody. Your job is to look back and say, hey, I know where you're at, and I know how I can help you get here. And that's the way that it goes. And that goes back to increasing the relationships and helping and spreading love and tapping into that love and energy.
That makes a lot of sense. And in a lot of ways, it's funny because I never really thought about that, but that does make sense. It's like I've just been able to I'm more seasoned in this than they are, which is the only reason I'm able to be that guide. And I never really put two and two together, but that makes a lot of sense. So what is a common struggle with people who come to you for like the rapid transformational therapy? What is a common struggle that you see with those with your clients, and what's like advice that you'd give on that? Because if it's a common struggle, I'm sure many of our listeners, maybe even myself included, can take something from that wisdom. So what advice would you give for that common struggle?
Common struggle. So there's the surface level stuff, right? I see people from so many different angles. Anxiety, depression. I've had folks come in with like suicidal ideations, sexual disorders, money blocks. It's across the board. Rapid transformational therapy, there's nothing that it's not good for, because it just accessing the subconscious. So I never really niched down to one specific approach or one specific symptom. Like there's people that will say I anxiety. There's some people that say that they help with depression, right? I'm everything and do everything. And the common thing that comes down to it is that underlies the root of all of the issues is self-love. It's loving the self and knowing the self. That's the biggest block that most people experience. And Marissa Peer even says it. She says it in this way: common root of everybody's issues is they think that they're not enough. My job is repairing that feeling of I don't love myself into I do love myself. And this comes in with the inner child work. Maybe that's what my specialty is helping to heal the inner child. But not everybody knows that they have an inner child to heal. So it's hard to say that, I guess, to throw that out there. But yeah, that's the most transformation that happens is when I'm able to hook people up to that reservoir that's inside, that love, that's always been there, but maybe it got covered up by worldly issues of like teachers or parents or just our culture that tells people like, you're not enough, or you need to do better. You need to act like this, or you need to wear these things, or you have to fit some sort of a standard. So that's where a lot of the confusion comes for a lot of people. Whenever you're talking about bringing it back to trusting the intuition, a lot of the confusion happens because the world doesn't tell you to listen to your intuition. The world is always guiding you outward and saying, you need this thing, you need that thing. It's a huge consumerist world. So that's I guess the overarching thing is it's self-love. Love heals all. It sounds so cliche, but it's true. I didn't make it up.
It's time to take a short break from our wonderful speaker. Are you in the need of guidance around love, career, family, life, or purpose? Embark on a spiritual journey inward with an intuitive tarot reading. Depending on what you're needing and looking for, I offer private one-on-one sessions as well as personalized email readings. It doesn't matter what the question is. A reading with me provides connection with your higher self, offering curated personal messages, or what I like to refer to as spiritual roadmaps, guiding you to the future outcome you desire. Readings are insightful and affordable. If you'd like more information or to schedule a reading with me, please see the link below.
That makes perfect sense, because it's like, I would say that most people struggle with worthiness, but that underneath worthiness, do they love themselves, right? Do they feel like they're enough? And that's where that comes from. So that would totally make sense. That I think every single person, I mean, every reading that I do, even if someone tells me that they don't really know why they're, what their question is, that sometimes is like the component that comes up. And then I have to figure out the tactful way to be like, so you struggle with feeling enough? Let's talk about because sometimes that could also be triggering, is even hearing that.
You're here to trigger people.
Funny that you say that. Are you familiar with human design?
Yeah.
So I'm a projector, and I don't know how to say it because I'm not really that into it, but I love the idea of it. The cross tension or something like that. It's supposed to be like your mission statement or your life purpose type of thing. Mine is literally to provoke.
Yeah.
Which I had a hard time with that. I was like, I hate confrontation. What do you mean I have to provoke people? But that's when I was already doing these readings professionally. And that's when someone actually pointed out to me, they're like, that's what you're doing. You're literally shining a light on the areas that are most vulnerable that they need to work on. So you're provoking change in them just by like being able to see this and point this out to them. I accepted it a little better at that point. I was like, okay, I don't have to be like confrontational about it.
No, and there's a difference. There's a complete difference between doing this out of love and doing this out of hate. Like there are people that are going to trigger people and be like, hey, you suck because you're whatever. But you're doing it because you see something bigger in them. You see something that you see untapped potential. And if you're shining a light on it, you're supposed to go where you're invited, though. I should say that first. If you're doing a reading on somebody, it's fair game. They asked for it. But if it's somebody like a family member that's not ready for it, it's wrong to do. Those are the rules. I don't make those rules up. It's a loving intervention, I should say. It's a loving intervention that feels triggering, and it does upset people here and there.
Yeah. And so far, even when people have been really emotionally triggered by what I said, I haven't gotten like animosity for it yet. So, which is good. They're at least open enough to be like, whoa, okay. But what advice would you give for self-love? So that is such a hard, big concept anyway to tackle. But if you were to give some kind of a bite-sized step in the direction of self-love, like what would you suggest?
I mean, there's tons of practices of how to do this, but it starts out with just looking at yourself in the mirror, looking into your eyes and saying, I love you. That's an easy, free way to start doing it. And you just say, I love you. I love you. I love you. And you just keep saying that. At first, it's going to feel like weird and stupid and maybe untrue, but you just keep doing it because the mind does love repetition. It learns by repetition. So the more it starts to hear it, though, if it says, if you're looking at your eyes, looking through your eyes or into your eyes, and you're saying, I love you, the subconscious mind goes to work to find ways that you love yourself. That's just a rule of the mind, that it's an automatic process. It's not something that you really have to force. You just do it. The subconscious mind is like Google. You type in dogs. It's going to go on a search for dogs. So the mind is a supercomputer. How do I bring context to this situation? How do I bring information? And it's just going to go on a search. Sometimes there's going to be blockages there that's going to say server error or whatever. But the more you do it, the more routes it's going to take to make that a true statement. That's easy. That's free. But do you want to take forever to do it? Rapid Transformational Therapy is really quick. It takes me about 3 hours to break through some of the biggest love blocks. There's other ways, I feel like, too. Stop being so busy and allow yourself to find joy or look for joy in the world. Play. Get back to playing. Go back. And if it sounds childish, it's because it is, because you want to reignite and reconnect with that inner child. That's where the love blocks happen. Because how often are we telling children, don't act like that, don't do that? No, there's all of these things that kids do that's just natural to being a kid, and we have systems in place to smash that child out of them, which is crazy. It's crazy to me, which is why it inspired me to co-found a school. So that's a way there. That's some ways to come back to loving yourself. Love the feelings that you have, the feelings. And I'm talking about all the way from the black to the white and the spectrum in between, all of the colors in between, the feelings and emotions that you have. Sometimes people get angry and then they just shut themselves down because they're feeling angry. They don't love that emotion. That's a part of them that's estranged. That's a part of them that's fragmented off that they need to reintegrate, because there's no throwaway emotions. There's no such thing. But we're taught these emotions are inappropriate to express in front of people. So then we get disconnected and we're unable to have these relationships with people because we put on these masks. I'm not supposed to show this to people. I'm not supposed to show this to people because it's unlovable, because I was told it was unlovable, right? So is that 3 things that I said? So look into your eyes in the mirror, say, I love you, play, and love your emotions. Maybe there's a couple more things in there that I'm glazing over, but those are, to sum it up.
Yeah, no, I loved all of those. And I think, well, so the I love you in the mirror, it reminds me a lot of, oh my gosh, I forgot her name, but she's like a motivational speaker.
Louise Hay.
I don't think that she's the one that talks about like getting out of bed. You count down to get out of bed.
Like 5-second rule lady, or like,
Yeah.
heard of that. So mirror work, I first came across of it with Louise Hay. She wrote a book called You Can Heal Your Life, and it's a great book to read if your listeners are first getting into like the metaphysical world and the energetics of emotions. It's a really cool one.
So the one lady I'm thinking of, I can't remember her name, but she has another book where she teaches high-fiving yourself in the mirror.
And that's cool. I like it.
Really cool idea. I kind of like yours though, like as like maybe an introduction to that, because I did try the high-fiving myself in the mirror, but there's a couple problems with that. One, my sink is really big. So like 5 feet. So like, it's not, as easy for me to do that. It's awkward, but also it's just such a big motion that like for those that are more reserved, it could feel really out of their comfort zone. But just looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I love you, it doesn't take a lot of effort. It's just other than just choosing to do it and sitting with the emotions you get with it. And I think that that's just such a simple, easy first step where it doesn't take a whole lot. So I really like that. And then going back to childhood and playing, that's something that comes in my readings all the time, is this idea of play, have fun. We're taught work hard, play later. And it's like, no, play while you work, because that's where your joy is, right? So, I love that. And so I feel like what you mentioned was starting with I love you to yourself, and then inner child work. And then the last one you mentioned is basically shadow work, where you're reintegrating the parts of you that you dismissed or threw away because you didn't think it was good enough. But it's you, it's still you. All of you is enough. So yeah, these big concepts, but I do feel like just starting with I love you in the mirror is such a great first step.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marissa Peer, she also talks about writing I am enough in the mirror. So and going back into how the mind works, your subconscious mind is so much more aware of you of the world around you than your conscious mind is. Like, we can only focus on a couple of things consciously. Your subconscious mind is picking up everything in the room, even beyond the room. It's picking up on this information. And it's way too much information for us to process, because we would totally burn up and burn out. So a way that to use that to your benefit is to place these notes around your house. I am enough. I am lovable. And your subconscious mind, even in your peripheral, it's going to pick it up, and it's going to look for the information that fits into it. You don't even have to focus on it. That's why vision boards work, is because you're seeing these images, you're seeing these words, and your subconscious mind is like, oh, let me file that away. Let me file that away. Let me file that away. So bombarding yourself with these loving sayings and this loving information, eventually those neural connections make a connection, and it becomes like the super highway of love.
That is awesome. Yeah, I think that, not enough is talked about the subconscious and how our consciousness is just the tip of the iceberg. I feel like that should almost be talked about more, because our subconscious is really the one that's in charge of us, but we just don't realize it.
I think is that a malicious intent from the darkness of the world? Is that intentional, or is that accidental? You can see either way. But because I know this, and because I've learned all of this stuff of how to work the mind, how to make the mind work for you, that's what has inspired me to create the micro school that I was talking to you earlier about. I want to start these children off knowing about the mind and how powerful the mind is. Did you ever in your your elementary, middle, or high school career, at any point, did you ever learn anything about how the mind works? No. So with that, what is the education? Where is the gap, and why aren't we doing this? It does not make sense. It's not like this is new news. Like, there's religious scripture. There's so many different ways that this has been written about for thousands of years, that now it's like, oh, empower professional development, personal development. Like, let's use this. This is new. It's not new. It's not new.
It is interesting. I will say though, and I think this is just part of the shift that we're in, the younger generation are way more aware than like mine and your generation was. And I've seen this doing readings with, like, I did one of the most successful reading events I did was at a graduation party. So I was talking to old kids, and they were, I mean, it's so funny. Not only was I told, you were the hit of the party, you were more popular than the mechanical bull outside, but I could see these kids were not only understanding the verbiage and the things I was telling them, but they were retaining it. Apparently they weren't talking about their own readings because they were letting it sink in. And they asked me to stay an extra hour because there were more kids who wanted to line up. It was so cool. But I don't think that would have landed as well in like my generation, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, wouldn't have landed.
There is you don't think it, you see it. There is a new consciousness that is available to us now that hasn't been available to us before. And even with our generation, you look at the previous 2 generations before us, the people that came through in the 40s and the 50s, there were a few people that came through and they're like, yo, energy is real. They're talking about the energetic world, but not everybody is accepting of it. So it was a really rough road for these guys to help pave the way. And then there's this other wave that comes through during the psychedelic revolution, whenever in the 60s and the 70s, everybody's getting high, and they're expanding their consciousness. Then that was a whole new phase of consciousness. So there's these first guys, they're starting to essentially seed our consciousness for broader, higher consciousness. 60s and 70s came through, and then the 80s, and we're even more open than the ones from the 60s and 70s. And now you're seeing another generation of it. So there are these different consciousness levels that continue to pop up. And right now we're at one of the biggest shifts that humanity has seen cumulatively. So there's more people here on Earth right now with higher consciousness levels than there has been in the past few hundreds, thousands of years.
I definitely believe that, because I have, like you said, I'm witnessing it. And I'm always so in awe when I hear like podcast interviews of those that were doing this work in the 80s and the 90s, because I can imagine how they did it, because it wasn't, that was like the woo-woo stuff. That was like even yoga was like, people were very, oh, it's yoga, that's so woo-woo. But now everyone does yoga. Everyone at least knows what it is and knows its benefits, and they don't like immediately scoff at it anymore. And so it is pretty amazing when you think about the people they really roughed it out for like 40 years.
Yeah. I mean, longer. Yeah. And then it was the big turning point was whenever they dropped the atom bomb in World War II. We were basically going to kill ourselves. Then that's whenever they were like, Earth needs some help. We need to get you guys down there stat. And there were some cowboys that were like, I'll go.
But I love hearing, like now, like we're here right now, like all of us, especially those that are being activated and waking up, like we're here because we chose to be here. There's a reason we're here. And that just feels so relevant, especially, in the work that like me and you do. It's just, you can see why it's relevant. It's very cool.
Yeah.
I would love to shift to what I like to call synchronicity story time, which I'm sure you have several. with the work that you're doing. And but it's just, this idea, and you've already shared a few of them with with how you found your work. It was kind of like one door would open when you needed it to. But do you have any, and maybe even in your therapy sessions or things where you've really seen something that you can't explain that was just really cool, kind of supernatural? Do you have anything like that you could share?
Supernatural. I don't even believe in supernatural now. Now that I feel like I'm in too deep to think that. How do you choose one? There's two things that I'd like to say about that. Is first one, here's a positive synchronicity that happened. So I had a family member call me say last September. So I have a sister that killed herself. She committed suicide, and so she was a twin too. So what happened in that, there was a huge shift, and this family member that called me, whenever she called me, she sounded exactly like my sister. She was like using the same phrases, she was in a crisis. And I had asked her if she talked to God, if she prays, and that made her angry. I was like, she was been so cut off from source energy, so far removed and so much like stuffed into the darkness that just irritated her. So I was like, okay, that's not the path to take right now. And then I asked her, I was like, do you think that you'd let me do a soul retrieval for you? I ended up doing she agreed to it, and I did a remote soul retrieval for her. And what this is you go into a trance state, and you state your intention that the soul retrieval is for so and so. And I have 3 animals that help me to find soul parts, different soul parts. And one of them is a python, one of them is a boar, and then the other one is a blue jay. And I found probably like 5 soul parts for her. And I asked each one, who would you like to ride back with? So whenever I asked them who would they like to ride back with, they all got on the blue jay. And I was like, oh, everybody's on the blue jay, everybody. So I wrap up the session, and it takes me like 15-20 minutes to do that. I recorded it, I sent it to her, and she listened to it. She said that she just bawled her eyes out listening to it, because I asked these soul parts, like, why'd you leave? What was happening? And then I get them to work through that. I help them to work through that. And then they come back. The next morning, she gives me a text, and she says that her boyfriend and her were walking outside, and her boyfriend says, oh, look at the blue jays. And there were 5 blue jays up in the tree. And she said that was another moment. She was like, I just started crying. It just like felt so good. And here's the cool thing. I didn't talk to her for a few months up until like February. I was like, so how's it going? How are you? And she said she's been sober ever since. She said that her relationships are better. She's connecting with people better. And it was just such a cool, would you call it a synchronicity, or is just like a natural thing that happens? I don't know. It was a cool one.
Yeah, that's definitely a synchronicity, because you said you found about 5 of soul pieces for her, and then she saw 5 blue jays, and they all rode on a blue jay. I like got from that. And then, just the follow-up, that's synchronistic too, but that's more of a confirmation. That's what it's like when you're more whole, when you're put back together. You don't, it's easier to make better decisions. And
it's another part. I don't know how much more time we have. I know that I talk a lot. I've been kind of toying around and trying to ground this part down, but synchronicities, and maybe this is the shadow work that I've been that I do, or integrating the shadow work. Like, even synchronicities are happening all of the time, and everything is related, and it's all helping your soul evolve. And I guess if you're on the spiritual path, you're going to look at these breaks in relationships as, I'm able to see them as a synchronistic event. Maybe that's not the word to call it, but I needed that breakup in order to help me to progress and move forward. So this happened with another family member where we had a breakup in 2019. And it was just, we didn't see eye to eye. We kind of disagreed, and it was a hurtful situation, and we just didn't talk for a couple of years. But within that couple of years, there was a huge healing moment that happened, where there were parts of my ego that needed to grow up. and detach from seeking the approval of that family member. And I didn't know that that's what I was doing, because here I am, I think that I'm this independent woman, and I'm grown up, and I'm living in my big girl life, but there were parts of my unconscious that were still stuck and in seeking approval, and that was stopping me from my spiritual evolution. It was stopping me from embracing my full spirituality. And that event I needed to bring me to the space where I am right now. So I'll ask you, do you think that you could call that a synchronicity? Because it's not all positive. It was like a very negative experience, but it was an experience that kind of pulled me through the fire. And what's cool about that too is, after I got that revelation, after I got that upgrade, I should say, that I grew up in that, I went back to mend that relationship, to be a different person in that relationship, and now we're back together. So is that, would you call it a synchronicity in the shadow side, of the dark side?
I mean, that's like one of those things in hindsight where it had to happen the way it did. I mean, I have a crazy synchronicity story with one of my I don't know if I could call him an ex, because we were together for like 2 months. So it was more like a situationship, but there were so many synchronicities that in hindsight, even though it didn't work out and it was a pretty painful breakup or whatever it was, I can see why it happened. Like the universe was like, wake up, get yourself back out there. And I would never have if it wasn't so loud. The synchronicities were ridiculous. He lived in we met on Bumble, but he lived in my complex. Then his path, and he's from New York, so he's not even from California. And then his roommate, or his previous roommate, was my sister's best friend a few years ago. What? Then, I mean, there's just so many and thens. Then I found out that my cat, that basically jumped in my car the first time I met my cat, and then a month later my cat followed me home, and that was basically when I adopted him, used to belong to him when he was a kitten. So I mean, all these crazy, like, of course we were supposed to meet, and then it didn't work out. He wasn't we just didn't, he was emotionally unavailable, and all the things that after a while I was like, oh wait, I want a relationship, just not with this dynamic anymore. And so it just didn't work out. But now I'm with a partner that, I'm really happy with. So it was like, I feel like that it wasn't the greatest, because I was very confused when it didn't work out. I was like, why were there all these synchronicities? I don't understand.
Oh.
So it wasn't really a good overall experience by the end of it, because it hurt and it sucked, but it was what I needed to get me to where I am now, Yeah, I think that they can be they're not always positive, but in hindsight, you could see how it helps you get to where you're supposed to be.
I guess maybe that's where a lot of times people talk about synchronicities, and they're only looking for like the bubbly stuff. They're only looking, the clock says 11:11, or my angels are talking to me. And I don't dismiss that at all, but there's a whole other part of life that helps to make this such a more beautiful picture that gets dismissed. So synchronicities, I mean, that definition is seemingly unrelated, right? But I can't see how anything in this life is not related to the next.
It's like the wink from the universe. It's when you actually can see something line up in perfect time that, in that moment you were like, what? This never would have happened if it wasn't supposed to. I think that that's what synchronicities are. They're more like, it's just like a wink from the universe. Like, yeah, you're not alone. Just a reminder, you got this,
Yeah. I'm still kind of processing this. I think that seems like it's like in the beginning, whenever you are first starting to wake up, it is nice. And this world is hard to live in. And a lot of people are on the path, and it's hard. People don't get on the spiritual path because life was easy. It doesn't happen.
Something to ground us. We just, like, that's what it was for me. I got to a point where I was just like, because I was agnostic. I grew up Christian, broke away from that in my late teens. And then 2020, I think I finally just got fed up. I was like, what the heck do I believe? I need to believe in something. I'm either that or I'm going to go full blown atheist, which I don't want to do. And so that's what started me on my path. I think I finally got more open, because before I was trying to find religions. Like I tried to plug into Wicca, and I tried to plug into like Buddhism, but it was too much of a box for me. And it just, like, Wicca just felt like the extremist of Christianity, like just on the female side. And I was like, but that's, and no, nothing against those that are any of those religions, because I really feel like, you know, it's the faith and it's whatever resonates with you. But for me personally, it felt too extreme on both sides, which is why now I'm like, I understand my beliefs are, they're just too broad to fit into a box. I think all of them are right.
That's the new consciousness that we were talking about earlier that's coming in. It's what breathes life into religion, and any religion that is written, it came through a person, and that means that it came through their filters. That's the box that it comes in. It's something that made sense to them, that helped them in their life, that now they're trying to prescribe to everybody else. And that's where the ego comes in, and we've humanized spirituality, where we've confined it and organized it. And as soon as you try to organize God, you've lost it. You've lost it. So it makes sense that you've been on the path that you have been on. You lost your religion in order to find your God, essentially, right?
Yeah, so. Exactly. And I can't even put a definition on it, because it's just, I feel like there's beauty in Christianity, there's beauty in Wicca, there's beauty in Buddhism and in Muslim and all of them. Like, there's beauty in all of them, and there's something tangible in all of them. But for me, it's just, I can't explain it. But yeah, I can't put a definition on it. I can't put a box on it. And that's why I think my readings resonate with so many people, because it doesn't matter what their faith is. It's all, as far as I'm concerned, it's all the same.
Yeah. It is. It's all talking about the same thing. Like, we don't even call water the same thing that they call water in India or Mexico, right? There's these different languages, these different words for water. H2O, we call it water, but in Japan they call it mitsu or whatever. You know, it's could these different regions of the world be able to describe what God is, and there not be a little bit of a discourse? No, you're not talking about it. You know, it's crazy. It's crazy to think that that's the end all be all. You have to choose one. That paradigm is shifting, and we're seeing that in real time here today. And it's great that you're sharing your style. It's not everybody else's style.
No, that's a great analogy, though, that water is water, but it's called different things in different countries. And something that just came to me right now when you're saying it's the wave, that it's the new paradigm where we're starting to see things more broader. I wonder if that new paradigm shift really started with COVID, because that's the first event that it doesn't matter who you're talking to, what country they're from. If you talk about, oh my gosh, 2020, or you say, oh my gosh, COVID, everyone knows what you're talking about. I've done interviews with people in like the UK. You say 2020, they know exactly what that means, because they experienced the same way that we did here and in Australia. And anywhere else in the world, we all know collectively what 2020 was and what COVID was. And
Great awakening, huh?
It's so funny too, because in hindsight, it's like, that's also when the Capricorn turned into the age of Aquarian, and you can see the shift in that too.
Oh, see, I'm not too much into astrology, but I do love hearing about it. So that's cool to
that one.
hear.
Did you know about the shift? Is that something that you were aware of? Oh, okay. So, and I'm not super huge on astrology either. I mean, I do. It's to the point where, like, if someone tells me their sign, I'm like, I see it, but, it's not like I'm super into it. But during 2020, December 21st, the winter solstice, we shifted we were in the age of Capricorn for hundreds of years, and Capricorns are very structured. They're the boss. They like things to happen a certain way. They're traditionalists, right? Well, that's how we were living life. The age of the Aquarian that we shifted to on that winter solstice, they're innovators. They think outside the box. They're all about bringing the community together. They're creative. They don't like to do things traditionally. So it's like, if you think about the energetic shift that happened too after COVID, during COVID, it's like, oh, okay.
That's such a perfect example of what I just was talking about, the synchronicity. There was like this huge negative event that pushed us forward into our soul mission. And so that's what I've always talked about, how 2020 was a gift. It was a gift for many. Whenever 2020 was happening, I was like, I was born for this. Let's go. Come on, everybody. Because my business was booming, because there were so many people that were like, all of their distractions stopped. And I'm talking about work, the busyness of life, it stopped. And then they started to feel. And whenever they were feeling, they didn't like what they were feeling. They didn't know what to do with it. And then they were like, Shay? And I was like, yep, come on, I'll usher you in. Come on.
That's so cool. Yeah, I know a lot of the spiritual community did boom on that because they were able to find outlets that the people needed, because so many people were feeling like, what am I doing with my life? That was me too. Like that's really how I stepped into my spirituality. Was I started listening to podcasts, and like I said, I got to a point where I'm like, what the heck do I believe? So I just looked up spiritual podcasts, and then things started resonating. But there is this one called Expanded, and they focus on neuroscience. So it's like self-hypnosis and rewiring the brain. But there was a lot of spiritual little nuggets in there, but it was grounded in science. And that's what I needed at the time.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I ever heard my intuition. I signed up for this workshop for inner child work. And I was putting groceries away one day after I signed up for the workshop, and I heard clear as day, you want to do this work, don't keep alcohol in the house. And, of course I tried to find loopholes, and I listened to it, but I kind of tried to figure out ways around it, because I wasn't an alcoholic, but I was a single parent. And that glass of wine was like how I unwinded at night after I put my daughter to bed, so I looked forward to that, like, and I know that it was socially acceptable and everything else, but I was like, if I was going to do this workshop and the spiritual work, I couldn't have alcohol, because I knew, and I already knew that going in. I was like, I don't want to be unclear when I do this work between a glass of wine and doing this hard spiritual healing work. And it was a rough day, and I had wine in the fridge. I was going to have a glass of wine. So that's why it was super clear. You cannot keep it in the house, because if at the time, now I can have I can have a bottle in there and not touch it because I don't care anymore. But at the time, it was going to be a crutch,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy
Yeah.
what happened. Funny, but I'm grateful for it in hindsight.
Absolutely. And touching on the alcohol and the substances that they call it spirits, they they call it spirits and wine, don't they? It does detach you and disconnect you from what your soul is guiding you to do. It drowns that voice out, because and it stops you from being a creator in your life. It makes you extremely passive in your life. And that, I feel like that just starts to open up the drain and keeps you going down and down and down. And I'm not a purist here at all either. I'm sober-ish. Sometimes I'll drink, some, like most of the time I don't. But if you're doing it daily, like I used to, I was so disconnected from my soul. Whenever I sobered up, I was so connected to my soul, I couldn't shut it up. I had to quit my job because it was draining my soul out. I had to have the alcohol to drain out the noise of, like, this job's sucking the life out of you. You hate it. It's not what you're supposed to do. It's not, but the alcohol drowned that voice out. When I became sober, I couldn't shut it up. And then I finally was like, all right, I quit. I'm jumping full into the healing transformation work. Didn't have a client at all for like 2 months. And I needed that. It's another thing that I needed to move me forward, because there was, if you're not making money, you're not worthy. And then once I sat in that desert, the monetary desert of not making money, and I had my breakthrough, oh, you are worthy without making money. And once I actually had that breakthrough, that's when the clients started flooding in. So that's a gift of getting sober. It's not an easy road to walk down, and not a lot of people do it, but it is there's nothing else that's worth it in this life.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not an easy road for sure. I mean, for me, it was like the first time I felt my feelings. I mean, the first couple weeks of not having it in the house also meant I wasn't drinking, because I don't go out. I'm a single parent. My life is at home, right? So I wasn't like going to the bars or anything like that either. So like when it wasn't in the house, it wasn't available to me. And I started like anxiety and panic attacks. And I was seeing a therapist at the time, and I remember asking him, am I addicted? Was I addicted? Am I going through withdrawals right now? And he was like, no, you weren't drinking enough to be physically addicted. You're feeling your feelings. That's it. That's it. All this is the stuff that you've been numbing this whole time.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's just, it numbs you. It's a Band-Aid, but we're here to the only way to grow is you got to feel your feelings. You got to actually be present for them and
Yeah.
acknowledge them. And so that was a big learning shift for me. But
Feel it to heal it. And that's in our culture. You talk about why it's so accepted. It does keep you in a monotonous life, and it prevents you from growing and expanding. And again, I asked that question, is there malicious intent behind that, or because it is all over the place. There's so much, it's so accepted. It's like, yeah, oh, here's a drink. Let's celebrate. Let's celebrate.
Yeah.
Oh, you're sad? Here's a drink.
Even things like, shrooms or psychedelics, which are a little bit more spiritual, you know what I mean? Where you can get some really cool awakenings. Those are still very taboo and still like, what, you shouldn't do that. Drugs are bad. It's like, yeah, but have you seen what alcohol does to you in comparison? You at least you get some crazy insights with the other ones.
I've had some conversations about this too, and it's you judge them by their fruits. I know that we're getting out of time, but if you look at what psychedelics do when they're used with intent to heal, to transform, and afterwards you're seeing that your relationships are flourishing. You see that you're able to connect with people better. Judge that by its fruits. It's something that enhances your life and helps you to live a fuller life. Does alcohol do that? So judge it by its fruits. Does it? And for the most part, alcohol and these other drugs, they ruin your life. They destroy your life because they disconnect you from your soul and your intuition. Now, mushrooms and ayahuasca and all of these other psychedelics that are helping people to heal, they're hooking you back up into your soul. Now, you don't have to do drugs to hook yourself back up to the soul, but it does do that. The wisdom in these plant medicines absolutely does that. So you can't judge it based on what culture says this is okay, this is not. That's wild.
More of an intuitive thing for sure. And that's like, I came from, like, back when I was still drinking wine and whatever else, I came from the idea of like, shrooms are like not good for you. And, but then I started listening to different things, learning different things. And it made me go, wait a second, hold on. Everything I've been told is a lie. But yeah, so we are already out of time. And I feel like we could talk for much longer, we'll do, but so maybe we'll have to have you back on,
Yeah, got lots to say.
Yeah. My final question I like to ask everyone is, do you believe that everyone has a purpose?
Yeah. Should we end it there? No. Nobody's here by mistake. There's no such thing as a mistake. Like there's no, everybody has some purpose and some soul mission here on earth. Some people are like able to produce more and be more like monetarily successful. And some people are here just to learn about life. There's these different life paths, and we're all here playing a role in the conscious field. Absolutely, everybody has a purpose. If there's breath in your lungs, you have a purpose. Does it have to be some big extravagant thing? No. It could be something as little as like you helped pick up somebody's papers, and that brightened their day. Yes, absolutely. Everybody has a purpose.
And I love how you also touched on it. Doesn't have to be, you don't have to be Sylvia Brown or, someone who's like really big. It's not about that. It's about, like you said, how you're impacting those around you. And that can come in all sorts of different forms.
Purpose, yeah, it comes in ordinary lives. And that's it. Yeah, absolutely. Don't get me started.
It has been so fun. And again, I feel like we could talk forever, but we do have to hone it back in. So if our listeners want to work with you, they want to get a therapy, a rapid transformational therapy session, or any of the things that you offer, how can they find you?
Yeah, so I have a website, transformwithshay.com. Big emphasis on the with, because I'm transforming, constantly evolving. I hope to never end because it's a fun ride to be on. And then also there's Facebook and Instagram. They can look for Shayleen Halloran. Yeah, and then they would find it.
Perfect. I will be sure to put that in the show notes. So listeners, if you would like to connect with her, it'll all be there. It's easy to find. And yeah, again, this has just been such a fun conversation. And I'm just so grateful that you joined me today.
Yes. Happy to meet a new friend all the way in California.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining me on another inspiring episode. Remember, your purpose is a unique and unfolding path. I hope these conversations have ignited a spark within you. Until next time, keep exploring, growing, and embracing the beautiful adventure of connecting with your purpose. Stay tuned for more meaningful conversations. If you're wanting more, consider joining our free Facebook community called Spirit Journey Collective, your haven for spiritual exploration and personal growth. Dive into a supportive community where sharing spiritual experiences is encouraged. Unlock the power of intuition, embark on a journey of self-discovery, and connect with like-minded souls. If this sounds like a community you'd love to plug into, the link is in the show notes below. If you enjoyed the episode today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for joining me on this journey.